I know. I know.
Whatever. At least the women are on as the palate cleanser.
Yeah. Did I see Paige tweaked her ankle though?
Yeah, but she's back in the game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And Xavier is god awful.
Yeah. So. All right, so we've got some people joining us after an interesting game, to say the least, against Villanova. I know everyone was really optimistic coming into it, and for good reason there. And it did seem like there were some step backs today, but I still think probably a positive or two that we could try to dig deep and find from this game. But Russ, initial thoughts on today's game against Villanova?
Villanova took Bouknight out of the game. Bouknight, after he appeared to get hurt again, wasn't quite as aggressive. Villanova played him very well, and once he stopped scoring, once he went cold, that was going to be the game right there. UConn didn't have an answer and had no shows from pretty much everybody else on the court, save for maybe a couple of moments here and there. And when that happens, you're not going to win games against good teams. And credit to Villanova because they played a really good game, especially defensively. And that's what happens. I mean, end of the day, it's a loss at the number 10 team in the country, which could happen to literally anybody. Don't lose sleep over it.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, I know we all were optimistic heading into it. Villanova coming off a big loss to Creighton on the road. You know, that they had a week to sleep on that and get ready for today and come out with a bit of a vengeance. You know, the first half, it looked like UConn was going to be able to compete with them. Bouknight went off in those first 6 or 7 minutes there. He did seem like he tweaked his elbow or hand a bit there and didn't look quite the same after. But again, I think Villanova did tighten up on him. They were sending multiple guys at him, and no one else seemed to be able to make that move today. I did think that they were able to hang with them. You know, if we got a rematch of this in Madison Square Garden, I think I'd still like our chances to go up against them again. It took them till the end. They held Gillespie, I thought, relatively in check till the end there when he hit those threes. I don't think Villanova shot very well from three today.
They didn't. At one point, I know they were 3 for 20. They finished, of course, 5 for 22. So they made their last two. And yeah, that Gillespie one with the shot clock running down was a backbreaker and also insanely predictable.
Yep. Yeah.
Like you knew that
as soon as it went off. Yeah.
But I mean, they were down 5 with 1:30 to go.
Yep. Yeah.
And despite everything that was
pretty bad.
About the way they played.
Yeah. Russ, I know we've talked about this in the past too. One of my little pet peeves from today was the officiating. I'm not one to usually get into refs and all that stuff, but you mentioned, I think, a couple of these post-game shows ago, this isn't the reffing of the old Big East, because they certainly did not let them play much today. It seemed like, just brushing shoulders, and it was a foul call there. Yeah, for some reason I thought Book got clotheslined on that play at the end there. When he went up to intercept that, got tackled and nothing and play on. Only that only would have mattered to us who had the +7.5 with him going to shoot free throws with 20 seconds left there. But
it happened to me, who stupidly took UConn with the over.
Oh yeah. But what were your thoughts on the officiating today? Because I know you've been a Big East follower even since UConn hasn't been in the league. Is this just what to expect from here on out?
Yes, it is definitely what to expect. Big East officiating. I tried to warn everyone last year when people would complain about AAC officiating that Big East officiating is even worse. No one wanted to listen to me, and here we are. So we know it's bad. We know that Villanova gets a good home whistle because they're Villanova, and you just kind of have to expect that. And we also know that college basketball officiating in general is terrible, and that's not going to change unless the NCAA ever wants to pay its referees, which it doesn't. So this is what we're dealing with, and you have to adjust. And yes, there was a time when you were allowed to play basketball in the Big East, and I wish we were still at that time. And then, of course, I watch Bouknight get leveled, and there's no call. And instead of going old Big East, it's, me being really, really angry. But that's how it is. Whatever. Yeah. The officiating was terrible. It's always going to be terrible. So why use it as an excuse?
I know we talked about Bouknight. Anyone else from this game that you had any strong thoughts on? I mean, say Tyrese Martin had a pretty good. He always has some quiet, good games, and he was pretty quiet. But I think still stuffed the stat sheet a bit there. But outside of those two, Sonogo had a few flashes, offensively. Defensively, I thought this was a really tough matchup for Sonogo. And you saw that, there were a few times where he would get switched and he was on Gillespie. And that's just not a matchup he's ever going to win, I don't think.
Yeah, Sonogo didn't have his best game. Still had a couple of good moments, and when Villanova double teamed him, he was still able to fight through it a couple of times, and that was good to see. You could tell he's going to be a really good player. There's no question. I think maybe one other guy to mention here, and again, not his best game by any stretch, but why? Jackson.
Yeah.
And did not have a good game offensively. He fouled out. I understand that, but I thought he played really good defense in the first half in particular, and seemed to be the only guy who could defend Gillespie for a few minutes there, especially after he cooked RJ Cole twice.
Yeah. What were your thoughts? Because it seemed like UConn came out and played with some of that inspired tempo they've been playing with the past couple games. Then it kind of seemed like it turned once Bouknight went out for a little bit, that they just reverted back and never got back into playing with some tempo. It just seemed like, again, you were seeing shots, the offense starting to try to do something with 10 seconds left on the shot clock, throwing up some ugly looks. What were your thoughts on them slowing it down? Because, again, I think we've seen these past couple games that when they get out and play quicker, that it's a strength for them.
Yeah. The offense was a mess. We know that. One thing to remember, you're playing Villanova. Right. This is a matchup between two teams that rank in the 320s to 330s nationally in tempo. So you can't expect this to be, a fast-paced, high-flying game. And when Bouknight really stopped playing with the confidence that we've come to expect and the aggression that we've come to expect, I'm not sure UConn really had a guy they could trust to speed the game up. Now, it didn't help that when they got into the half court, they couldn't do anything.
Right.
So that definitely annoyed us even more. But it's frustrating to watch a game at that pace when you're not able to convert. I'm not sure how they could have done a better job with this.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair criticism, or fair reasoning there. Coming up and looking at this team down the stretch, this was kind of the big challenge they had remaining on the schedule. And I know it's easy to freak out a bit and say, hey, this is a game. Now they're back on the bubble. It's going to be up and down. But I do think this is a game not to get overly concerned about. Yes, it would have been nice you win this. You're pretty much a lock. Now, you will have to sweat things out a bit. But I think the way the schedule turns out for them, it does give them some good games to build on. You've got 2 against Georgetown, 1 against Marquette, and then 1 at Seton Hall, which I think will give them a chance for a good quality road win to kind of round the season out. What are your thoughts on the schedule the rest of the way here for the next couple weeks?
Yeah, I mean, you could look at this 2 ways. One, as you said, this was an opportunity for a huge win. You could put yourself firmly on the right side of the bubble and kind of go from there. Or you could look at it as, a little bit more conservatively and go, well, UConn should be favored in at least 3 of these last 4 games. If they can go 3-1, they're in a really good position. If they split, maybe lose 1 to Georgetown, or if they split with, or if they lose both Marquette and Seton Hall, then they probably have some work to do in New York, and that's just how it's going to be. I choose to kind of look at it as the second way. This would have been a great bonus to have. End of the day, though, if they go 3-1 in these last 4 games, they're going to be fine.
Yeah, and that's what I agree with you too. Seton Hall's, I think, going to be the toughest one. If they walk out of this 3-1 with the loss being Seton Hall, I think you go into the Big East tournament, feeling relatively good. Win a game, maybe 2, just to feel good about yourselves heading into the NCAA tournament. But I think this team at least is going in the right path. I know we've got a comment in here about discussing Whaley, and today definitely wasn't one of Whaley's better games. I know he threw up that one brick that wasn't even close. But he just seemed kind of out of. But again, almost everyone seemed out of sorts on offense today. So I don't know if I want to harp on Whaley looking out of things today, but I do think he struggled as did pretty much everyone else today.
Yeah. And Whaley hasn't really been great since conference play began.
Yeah.
Had a couple of good games, but really, once the competition stepped up, Whaley kind of took a couple steps back. Now, on the other hand, still had 4 blocks today. He's still a really good defensive player. But I mean, this wasn't going to be a game anyway, I think, where UConn was going to get a ton done inside, other than, maybe get some rebounds.
Yeah.
But this wasn't Whaley's game. Teams, I think, have defended him well in Big East play. It's disappointing, and it puts a little bit more pressure on someone like Adama Sanogo, who, to his credit, has, I think, answered the call for the most part over these last few games.
Yeah, I see a comment here on a cook, and we'll get to that in a second. But as I've been monitoring the timeline, getting an update from Hurley saying that Book Knight got a little nicked up, that they were physical with him, but he thought the issue today was mostly fatigue and conditioning, and trying to do a little bit too much there, which I think from what I was watching, and again, I'm not a doctor, so by no means trust my medical opinions on anything, but it looked like Book was just getting frustrated by the way they were defending him. They were really throwing a lot at him there. And again, it did look like he was trying to force some things. His shots were a little bit short. So you could tell those are kind of classic signs of him being gassed and out of shape a little bit.
I mean, given what we observed, that's probably the best case scenario report we could have gotten.
Yeah.
That, we know he got a little nicked up. And if it's just his conditioning isn't where it needs to be yet, that's going to come with time. Like we said at the beginning, Villanova played him really well. Once it became clear that Book Knight could pretty much do what he wants in the first couple of minutes, they pressured him. They got on him as soon as really anytime he had the ball across half court.
Yep.
They didn't let him penetrate. They doubled him when they had to. And UConn couldn't get somebody like a Tyler Polley open like they were able to in that Marquette game when they used Book as the decoy. They didn't have anyone who could step into that secondary role. And as long as they weren't going to have that, then Villanova could keep taking their chances by making Book Knight's life a living hell. And that's what they did. And the more they did it, the more frustrated Book Knight got. The more frustrated he got, the more he did things like, a couple of times he drove right to the baseline and picked up his dribble.
Yep.
Things like that you learn not to do, but maybe out of frustration, or you see, you got these two bodies coming at you again. It's just a reaction and you do it. And now you have to make a bad pass, or you can't find the open guy or whatever. Like it kind of snowballed for him in a way, really. And I'm glad he made that 3 at the end. At least he had something to cling to.
Yeah, and he did have a little bit of a smile on his face after that one. So you could tell he was definitely having a game where he was feeling pretty frustrated by what Villanova was throwing at him. And when we do talk about conditioning, I mean, we do have to remember it's his second game back after sitting for 8 games. You kind of wish you had another Providence type game before this one. Get him, a couple warm-ups before you go into Villanova, who's going to be probably the toughest opponent that they face, from here on out. So I think it was tough for him. It's nice to see that it doesn't seem to be anything serious. And I do think had it been anything a bit more serious, especially with how they've handled things, I don't think you necessarily would have seen him as much in the second half there.
Not.
Yeah, you would hope not.
He played that second half against Marquette, so
yeah.
We'll see.
We'll see. I know we've got to mention here about a cook, and we haven't seen him play. I think he got maybe 1 or 2 minutes today at most, and we saw. I don't think he played at all last game when Hurley had said that he was kind of banged up. But last night in the Zoom seemed like a Cook was in a bit of a better position to play some more minutes today. But it just doesn't seem like a Cook is up to really get back into things quite at the level people want to see. I know we got that nice outburst from him against Xavier, but it seems like since then it's still been a little bit of a rough go for him.
Well, let me spin this for you. He played 1 minute against Providence. He played 4 minutes today.
Okay.
He quadrupled his playing time. So what's everyone up to? No, I was surprised that he didn't play more after what Hurley said yesterday. So I would definitely be interested to see what Hurley has to say in the post game about a Cook, because I'm not quite sure what to make of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see there. I know we've got some more here on experts demanding Andre Jackson play point guard.
Tyler really wants to see that.
I mean, he did. He had one really good pass today. Was it to Whaley or Sano?
Harder than I know, Tyler. You said this in the chat earlier. He throws the ball harder at than anybody I've ever seen.
But every game that I watch Andre and see him play, it really does seem like he's just going to be a really bright spot for this team going forward. He's just so athletic. He's got the pieces there. It's just ultimately going to be putting it all together. And again, getting some more playing time. You know, as a freshman, he's really playing. You know what is this? His 5th or 6th game, maybe?
You expect me to know things. Let me actually look. Jackson. We're still talking about Jackson, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, this was his 5th game since coming back from the injury.
Okay. All right, so maybe as a total of freshman, maybe got 8 or 9 games under his belt there. So it's nice to see him coming in, and he's looked significantly better, I'd say, though, in these stretches of games since he's come back than he did early on. Because even against Central and Hartford, he kind of looked a little out of place and struggled a bit. So it's nice to see him taking those steps because I think that's a big sign heading into the future.
Oh yeah, he has looked so much better since he came back compared to those first few games. And he's earned that starting spot. He doesn't look out of place at all.
No.
If I want to just read what Tyler is saying in the chat, Jackson led the team in assists and is best defensive player at the moment. Both are true.
Yeah. No, I think those are very fair statements there. And it's just, I think with him, especially with his athleticism, I think some of these fouls that are being called on him are ones just because the refs don't think someone can make that play. Like we saw the block against Providence. There was one today where he went up for one that looked relatively clean.
There was no contact. I know what play you're talking about. There was no contact. And then there was one, I think this one was on Jackson. I might be misremembering, where the whistle didn't blow until after the shot missed.
And that was towards the end when they there are a few late whistles today, in my opinion, too. We already spent 2 minutes talking about officiating, so we won't go back there. Yeah. Moral of the story for those who are just turning in. And now it's time for our favorite segment here in the Blanky's Yankee Hot Pepper Products Player of the Game. Russ, we'll let you go first as always.
Give it to Colin Gillespie. Listen, he played 37 minutes, scored 20 points, and hit 2 huge threes down the stretch that really put the game away.
Yeah, no, that's fair there. If I was going to break my rule of only giving it to players outside of UConn, I'd probably give it his way. But on the UConn front, again, I'll go with Bouknight. He gutted things out. I mean, without him going off in that first 6 or 7 minute stretch, because again, it looked like they were getting off to a slow start a little bit, and then Bouknight came. Gave them that energy there. So now just knock on all the wood in your homes that he's okay. Going to be able to play down the stretch. I think Tuesday against Georgetown's a great spot to be in after this game. Work out some of those kinks, get back into things, and then I think you go Georgetown, Marquette. So again, 2 more games to get Bouknight, some more legs under himself before you head into Seton Hall, which is going to be a pretty big game come Wednesday, March 3rd. Everyone will have that one circled. But at least heading into next week, I like where things stand going up against Georgetown and Marquette with 2 good opportunities to add some wins on the resume here.
Yeah, I wish the record looked a little nicer than 10-6, but
yeah.
If it's 13-7 going into the Big East tournament, then I mean, realistically, I don't know what more you could have asked for.
Yeah, because what is that?
From the Marquette game to now.
So what is that? So they're 7-6 now. So 8-6, 9-10. So 10-7 in the conference. I think that puts you in a relatively good spot there, especially having
a bye.
Yeah, it gets you the bye, I think. And I know when I talked to Joe Lenardi at the beginning of the season, he had said 11-9, and that was playing the full 20 games. Would get you into the tournament. So I'd have to say if they play 17 and they're at 10-7, I think that put them right on the mark where he had them initially in that spot to make the tournament with some good wins too. You've got that USC win looks better and better by the day. That having some good road wins, winning at Xavier is going to be good. And again, we'll see what happens at Seton Hall. But for the stretch run here, I think certainly be sweating some things out. But I think it's exciting times, and it's nice to be feeling this again.
Yes, it is. And what's going to be good is if UConn does get into the tournament, which, as we said, we expect them to. When they're seeded, they will be evaluated on UConn with James Bouknight, not UConn without him.
Right.
And that means that either they're going to get a seed that's probably better than what their record says they should get, or the committee will fuck up. They won't, and UConn will just surprise a couple people.
See, that's my I've seen. So it's interesting when you look at some of the different bracketology things out there. You see, like Jerry Palm has had them in like the 8-9 game for a bit, whereas then you see Lenardi, I think, had him in a playing game last. I think they were the first one in the first 4 out today, and in some sense, like anything to avoid that 8-9 game at this point. Like I don't want to say I'd rather take the playing game, but in some ways, I'd rather take the playing game than playing an 8-9 game.
I'd rather be an 11 seed than a 9 seed. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I don't want to have any chance of playing Gonzaga or Baylor.
Or even
in the second game.
Ohio State. No.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. The thing about the bracketologists right now is that they're kind of using, my guess at least, is kind of different methodologies to put these brackets together. Lenardi, I think, is going based purely on resume, which is fine. I think Palm, if he has UConn in the 8-9 game, is probably trying to game it out a little bit and go with, this is probably what's going to happen, and this is how the committee is going to interpret it. Because if things go kind of as we would expect, then I think the 8-9 game is a little bit more realistic, because the committee is going to go, okay, you lost, say, to St. John's, to Seton Hall. I think I remember these other games that they played. I don't know. You lost to Providence, but you didn't have Bouknight. The losses still count. You still have to evaluate them, but kind of take them with a grain of salt. Yeah. And I think that's more what Palm is doing, whereas Lenardi is looking at the hard numbers.
That's fair. And I think we'll close this with some what looks like good news out of a quote from James Bouknight on that fall, saying that, I just fell on my elbow. I felt it and it felt fine. I wasn't worried at all. So hopefully all good there. Get some conditioning over the next couple days, get ready for Georgetown and get things back in the good ways. So everyone, thanks so much for joining us. Have a good weekend. And we'll see you after.